What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, and we're going to be breaking down the first look for the Week 5 NFL slate. We are entering bye season. If you're familiar, weeks 5 through 14, usually there's a handful of teams on bye, so that's going to just make slates shorter. And on top of that, we have a Sunday morning game. Once again, the Vikings are overseas in Europe playing this time the Cleveland Browns in London this time. That one's going to be 8:30, so it's not on this slate. We'll talk about that one as a showdown slate in Discord if you wanted to talk about that. But we're going to break this one down. It's a 10-gamer. If you could and be so kind, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't already, we just passed 300 subs and we are on the road to 400. So if you guys want to interact with us, we do a lot of college football content, NFL daily fantasy sports, and then we do live streams on Sunday. And we're really excited after a really strong week of not only views, but we had a really strong week in terms of output. We had some great plays, and we're going to just keep on bankrolling and building to continue having a profitable season. So can't wait to interact with you guys. Let us know what you think, and let's get into this breakdown. So kicking it off, we're going to jump into our first 5 highest totals. A couple of these are, possible blowout potential, 10-gamer, but there's some decently high totals, good leverage spots. And on top of that, because there's not a ton of dominant guys to spend up for in terms of the receivers and quarterbacks, you can really kind of get to anywhere you want in a really balanced build. 5 highest totals, though. Lions at Bengals is the first one. I think the Lions are 10.5-point favorites. They're juiced to the over. It could even increase on the road. Usually big favorites on the road, or it's kind of trappy a little bit. And so I'm hoping that the Bengals at least put up a fight to where we can feel comfortable about some probably low-owned bringbacks in a very positive game environment. Next up, we have the Commanders and the Chargers at 48. We also have the Raiders and the Colts at 48. So 2 different games, very interesting prices. You have Jaden Daniels returning for the Washington Commanders, and then the Chargers, who dropped a game against the Giants this past week, are going to look to get back on track. So both of them have been susceptible. I think Chargers are in a decent spot to kind of get some offensive flow back against the Commanders. So we'll just kind of see what happens with that one. Raiders and Colts, Daniel Jones has been one of the biggest and positive surprises of the season, them starting out 3-0. Finally having a somewhat dud game against the Rams, but possibly could have been going ahead. A.D. Mitchell dropping a touchdown at the goal line, and then you also had A.D. Mitchell holding on a go-ahead touchdown for Jonathan Taylor. So they almost took one away from the Rams once again to start out 4-0. Raiders, meanwhile, Geno, let's be frank, he's turned the ball over too much. But fantasy-wise, he's been a darling for a lot of reasons, having 300 yards in 2 of the 4 games. But he's had a lot of turnovers, like I said. So I don't know how short the leash is going to start to get, because it's not like the options behind him are much better. But going forward, Cowboys-Jets. Obviously, the Cowboys are a defense we're going to be targeting a ton this year. They are dead last against quarterbacks. They are just putting up points after points. Jordan Love going for 30, even though he's a inconsistent fantasy asset, but they just had a 40-40 tie in overtime against the Green Bay Packers, and the Jets, who had an ugly game to drop to 0-4. Justin Fields still in garbage time got to 27 points. So both sides, even though CeeDee Lamb is out, even though the Jets are just not very good right now, tons of juicy opportunity for some cheap guys to really power off for those guys. Dolphins, Panthers, sicko game. I tell you, 45 is actually the 5th highest total on the slate. Tyreek Hill now out for the year because of his knee dislocation, multi-ligament injury. And then the Panthers had a 30-0 blowout, and then we're losing 42-6 to the Patriots the following week. They're just, I guess, really bad. I don't know what to make of them, but they're at home. It's a pick 'em, I think, as of this recording. But very interesting, some value options. And I think because of all the value in the mid-tier range at all the positions, I don't think a lot of people are going to be playing a ton of Dolphins and Panthers. So it's fun. We'll sprinkle some guys in and we'll talk about them. Contrarian games of the week, we're going to say the Giants and the Saints. Jackson Dart in his first start takes down the undefeated Chargers against the Saints, who right now are actually favored against the Giants at home. I think it's a fun game environment. I know it's only 41-point total, but no one's really that expensive. I think Alvin Kamara is under 6K for the first time that I could ever remember, maybe since his rookie year before he really became the pass-catching asset that he was later in the season. But he's cheap. Nobody's expensive on the Saints. And then in terms of the Giants, it's Cam Scatterboo leading the way now that Malik Neighbors is out for the season at just $6,000. So it's a game to be had, for sure. And then last but not least, the Cardinals and the Titans playing at 41.5 points. Cardinals were actually opened as a 9-point favorite, and it's already been been bumped down to 7.5. So a lot of money coming in on the Titans to try to possibly stay in and win their first game of the season. I don't really know, but I mean, you have interesting things because James Conner out for the year. They weren't on the main slate last week, but Trey Benson had most of the look until they were playing from behind for so long. Marvin Harrison, I hope, finally got out of his slump. I told you he was only going to go off if I faded him. He faded him. You're welcome, guys, if you're a Marvin Harrison Jr. stan. So he's back in the player pool, and I'm ready for him to let me down again. But on the Titans side, he's in low prices for Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard. Kyle Maynard is slowly creeping up, but still value, I would consider. And so there's a lot of names in that game environment to talk about. Let's talk about our first possible stackable options, though. And it starts off with the Detroit Lions, who have the highest implied point total. They are 10-point favorite in the highest spread on the weekend. $6,500. That is the first quarterback I'm talking about. That's why this slate's so interesting, because there's 4 teams on bye and then 3 other games that are not even on this slate. Jared Goff is kind of similar to what we have said about Matthew Stafford. He's a pocket-style quarterback, has no rushing upside, but if he's involved on multiple touchdowns, he can get there. Case in point, blowout against the Chicago Bears, where they dropped 50 basically in 3 quarters, was involved on 5 touchdowns, got over 300 yards, 37 fantasy points. But the other 3 games, involved on 2 in a low output game against the Cleveland Browns. I know they still dropped 34, but he had less than 200 yards, had 2 touchdowns. But then the other 2 games only was involved on 1 touchdown. Less than 13 points is not going to get it done at this price tag. But it's worth mentioning because there's a lot of reasonable options to stack him with. Let me pull up the flex plays for the Detroit Lions. I mean, honestly, I'll just pull them all up because they all matter if they're all going to be scoring over 30 a game still. But those are the main guys. Jahmyr Gibbs, $7,700. He's been as advertised, as steady as they come as RB1. 15 fantasy points despite only having 19 rushing yards in the opening week of the season. But since then, 427 and then 17.7. He needs to get over 20 to hit this price point. But we just saw a game where Cincinnati just had over 200 all-purpose yards dropped against R.J. Harvey, J.K. Dobbins. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey are really good running backs. They're not Sonic and Knuckles, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Boy, oh boy, did I mess up not playing you on that showdown against the Baltimore Ravens. Didn't expect that y'all were just going to thrash him like you did. Dropped 38. But David Montgomery, he's just still the same dude that is kind of touchdown dependent. But at the same time, he has these breakaway possible runs. Usually he's not going to go for 72 yards. But he has multi-touchdown upside in every single game because he's a really, really good player. This season, it's less David Montgomery, you start and you get an entire drive. Jahmyr Gibbs, you get the next drive and then back and forth. It's more so they're actually giving Jahmyr Gibbs a lot more opportunity to be the 1A. So far through this season, Jahmyr Gibbs, 66%, 56%, 69%, 62% of the snaps, whereas David Montgomery has not eclipsed north of 40, whereas it is basically was the opposite in the previous couple seasons with these two. But they've always been productive. $5,200 is an absolute bargain for the same matchup Jahmyr Gibbs has. So if he's involved on the touchdown, I suggest being overweight to him at $5,200. That's too cheap for the matchup. I understand because there's some volatility due to his role. He is kind of touchdown or bust, but he's one of those few that has multi-touchdown upside for being only $5,200. That's why I like him so much. Monmouth St. Brown, stay as they come. 42-point fantasy game in the game that they dropped 50. He was in the millionaire line. And then very solid, catching basically all of his targets. Set 6 touchdowns in the last 3 games. What else can I say about him? He's still under $8,000. Really hard to determine what is the best Detroit play. But Detroit is the play this week. Mixing and matching, doing whatever you want to. Sam Laporta, multiple duds in a row. But season low $4,200. His price keeps on going below. He is yet to score. At some point, he's going to score a touchdown and start to get there because he was a tight end 1 back-to-back seasons since he has been in the NFL. And then Jameson Williams. I hated this man in best ball. There was no reason he should have been going in the 4th round like he was. And I just was like, this is not it. Not all of these guys can pan out. Well, guess what? They're averaging over 30 a game right now. And he has been an absolute dud in 3 of those 4. The one that he has gone off, 2 catches, 108 yards. So he had a 64 and a 44-yard reception, 1 resulting in the touchdown. But otherwise, he is complete long ball or bust. He has not had the consistent, just steady, I'm going to get you 5 for 50 and just get you a solid day. And and with that being said, because of that role and lack of opportunity, even though he is playing a ton of snaps, he's been over 85% of the snaps in all 4 games so far. He's just not producing from a fantasy perspective. And that's why there's a $1,000 price dip for Jameson Williams, one of the biggest on the entire weekend, one of the biggest on the entire slate. He is in the pool. Very intrigued by the $4,900 price tag. I'm very intrigued by the $4,200 price tag. I'm very intrigued by the $5,200 price tag. I'm going to be playing a lot of Lions this weekend. I've been doing a lot of 20 max builds, and I think the best you can do is just pick your guy. You can maybe take a stand and fade 2 of them and being overweight to the others, but I'm going to be mixing and matching a lot of Detroit plays. That doesn't mean you have to do double stacks. That doesn't mean you have to play Jared Goff as your most exposed quarterback. But Detroit Lions are going to be a 40-point threat this week against the Cincinnati Bengals after back-to-back weeks where Cincinnati just absolutely got shellacked. I'm going to pull up Jake Browning just so you can see getting 48 dropped on them by Carson Wentz and the Vikings, and then followed that up with Bo Nix, who has not looked good at all this season, putting up 30 on them in terms of fantasy points, 28 overall, and they kind of took their foot off the gas after they went up 21-3 right before the half. So with that said, I hope that Cincinnati keeps it close to where I can do some bringbacks, because I think there's some decent matchups for Cincinnati. I'm not saying there's a puke stack opportunity for Jake Browning because he's been awful since he's been the starter. But Chase Brown being a season low, he is getting all the snaps. He's just been a complete no-show in terms of fantasy production. He has only scored 1 touchdown. But Jamar Chase has been the puzzling guy because of back-to-back less than 10 fantasy point games, but it is the Lions, and we love targeting receivers against the Lions. I know this 13th rank doesn't indicate how horribly their secondary has been. It is improved compared to recent years, but at the same time, Rome Odunze, that was our guy in week 2, and even in a 30-point blowout, he still goes for 32 fantasy points in the millionaire line. And then also it's very tough to rank because of the fact that the Packers were not only playing from a negative game script for a passing perspective, they're high volatile, like spread 4 targets to every single guy and just see what happens. And that's exactly what happened with the week 1 matchup. They played Joe Flacco last week. And on top of that, it's not like Cleveland has any pass catching options that are really much of a threat like Jamar Chase is. The only relevant threat that they've had is playing. Oh, and on top of that, in week 3 against the Baltimore Ravens, Zay Flowers had a dud after back-to-back strong performances, but Rashad Bateman came out of the water. Mark Andrews came out of nowhere to have 91 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. So this passing defense is still to be had. I don't know if this is the opportunity, but I know Jamar Chase is so good that if he is less than 5%, all you got to do if you play 20 lines, play him twice. Be over the field. I would just say be over the field is all I'll say for somebody that's finally back under $8,000. Could be a buy low opportunity after back-to-back duds. Tough matchups. I mean, Minnesota's really good as a defense. And on top of that, because they were down 41-3 early in the third quarter, they were not going to force feed him the rest of the way. And then Denver is one of the best secondaries in the entire NFL. Detroit is not. So $7,800. And if you don't like that, T. Higgins at 59. I'm just saying I like some bringbacks. I'm not going to do that every time I play a line, but I'm going to do that to be overweight to probably Jamar Chase and maybe another one. The next stacking option I'm going to bring up is another guy in a very positive game environment. It did not work out last week like I thought it would. He finally had a dud game. Multi-turnover game, only was involved on 1 touchdown, but he still had 41 passing opportunities. Just didn't get to that 300-point threshold. It was a weird game. The problem is, at this point, is Quentin Johnston just the only guy? I wouldn't say at this point, is Quentin Johnston just wide receiver 1 on the team? Ladd McConkey was a 2nd-round pick in most fantasy platforms, early 3rd-round pick if depending on what redraft platform you do. Quentin Johnston, every single game has outproduced him. He had 25 in a Brazil showdown in week 1. The following game, he followed up with, in a negative game environment for him, still had 7 targets, was close to the team lead. 71 yards, had that big 60-yard touchdown to really get him there. The following week, 10 targets, 6 for 89. The following week, 8 for 98, 13 targets, and a touchdown. He's got 4 touchdowns in 4 games. He's playing most of the snaps. Last week, he had a season-high 92%. And then going against Washington, slight favorite, 3-point favorite. Jaden Daniels should return, so I'm hoping that is a positive game environment to where it is a back-and-forth affair. And if that's the case, he's still $5,700. His price has not risen enough based on his role, being north of 85% of the snaps, tying for the team lead in targets, definitely leading the team in touchdowns. At 5,700, like that's the way to go. Allen had somewhat of a dud, but still had 7 targets. That you like to see that. He scored for each of the first 3 games. And then you got Ladd over here. What are we going to do about you? I did say one of my only big time L's of the weekend when I did the live stream was I wanted to be overweight to Ladd because I want to buy low when the ownership is low. Ownership was low, and he had his worst game of the season. Definitely a week early, but I only played him in a couple lines and ended up still working out with the other builds we ended up doing that were not Ladd lines. At some point, I don't know what to do with him. $5,500, that is a $1,400 dip based on his season high price back in week 2 against the Las Vegas Raiders. 3rd on the team in targets. Now Omarion Hampton is a dominant play, so I don't know what to make of him. I might still be slightly overweight, whatever that's going to be. If that's 5%, maybe I'll play 2 lines with him. If I play Justin Herbert in 4 lines, maybe I use him as a secondary stacking option twice and be over the field. But other than that, it's just a leverage play. It's not like I can back that up with any data because he has not been good so far this year. I wonder if they're just kind of not disclosing an injury. I don't know what's happened, but he's just a wide receiver 3 on the team that he followed up a 180-yard performance in the playoffs and just has been an absolute no-show through 4 weeks. So don't know what to make of it. And then Omarion Hampton, we talked about last week. My favorite call of the year so far is me saying last week was the week of the rookie running backs. And boy, oh boy, was that the case. Ashton Genty going for 37. Omarion Hampton going for 30. I didn't even play Quinshon Judkins, but he went for 20. Cam Scatteraboo did fine. He just didn't score a touchdown. Travion Henderson, wish he would have got more snaps. They were up by too much, essentially. But he still scored his first touchdown. Woody Marks, didn't even talk about him. 27 points against the Baltimore Ravens. Rookie running backs, man, they were there to stay. But Omarion Hampton, he was the chalkiest of them all, and he still worked out. Only 12 carries in a negative game script, though. I know it said it was 18, but they were trailing for most of the game. But he's got breakaway touchdown. He's got at least 5 targets, 5 receptions each of the last 2 games. So he's a pass-catching upside. He's a 5-box running back at this point going forward with Najee Harris being out. Last week, first full game without Najee Harris, 89% of the snaps. Hassan Haskins played 5. Kamani Vidal played 2. So it's his backfield. That is all. That is point blank, end of story. $6,500. We'll talk about the running back slate because it's so fun, but you got to put him in again because until he gets to the highs in K, which I don't know how soon or if he'll ever get there, it's hard to not just say we're just going to consider playing him every week. Joe Alt, just worth noting, he is going to be missing multiple weeks. Their left tackle was right tackle, now left tackle because Rashawn Slater being out for the year. He's going to miss multiple weeks with an ankle injury. So maybe that'll hinder his per carry average, but it's not necessarily going to say that he won't be a 20 touch a game guy or have that 100 plus all-purpose yard upside week in and week out going forward. Next up, we're going to go with somebody. We're going to talk about somebody that has actually been playing phenomenal football. I cannot give him enough praise. Every year, it just feels like in the last 6 years, and it's not even a feel. It has happened. Awesome year, injury. Awesome year, injury. Last year, obviously, was the injury because he not only did not play well, but missed the rest of the year where his hamstring came off the bone, went to IR about halfway through the season, and then now he's back. Against Philly, he played much better than that fantasy score indicates. He was really, really solid, and you had several CD Lamb drops down the stretch. I think he ended up with 4 drops in the second half of that game. All of them were downfield, so this could have been north of a 250-yard possibly touchdown or 2 performance. He also, I remember, had a drop touchdown. I think it was Jake Ferguson, if I remember correctly. But then followed it up, absolute shootout versus the Giants. 47 goes for 362 scores, 26 points. Always juicy, nice and juicy. The next week, CeeDee Lamb goes out, and usually I don't think people factor in enough when a star player that is the main factor of your game script goes down early, how much it F's up what you're trying to do. Case in point, Xavier Worthy and going down literally the first drive of the game, getting knocked out by his own guy, friendly fire Travis Kelce. Kansas City just was like discombobulated, did not look good. Obviously, the next 2 weeks when they played without him, they knew he was going to be out. It's not like they look much better. But I'm just saying it's a lot harder to improvise during the game when those guys are out compared to prepping for those guys, anticipating that they're not going to play. So obviously with CeeDee Lamb going down on his first touch, Dak struggled, but he still had 40 passing attempts, 250 yards. He only was involved on 1 touchdown, but 14 was okay, but is not going to do enough for you to score. Then last week against the Green Bay Packers, who dominated people in the first 2 weeks, all of a sudden I guess their defense is bad again because he had identical stats in terms of completions and attempts. If you see 31 of 40, but he got that 300-yard bonus, 3 touchdowns, and on top of that, 3 passing touchdowns. And then on top of that, a rushing touchdown, which he every now and again is able to provide as well. So 2 games in good game environments and shootouts with north of 26 fantasy points. And in this game, a high point total to where Tua Tagovailoa, if I'll bring him up, he is not in the player pool. But without Tyreek Hill, once again, kind of a similar thing where a guy goes down. He was heavily involved, had 6 for 65 before he broke his leg/knee. Had multiple touchdowns to Darren Waller, but they were also playing from ahead by 2 touchdowns. But 15.5, pretty reasonable for a $5,200 play if he was hypothetically on the main slate. With Dak only being 6,000 going against the Jets. The Jets allowed 4 passing touchdowns to Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, the Josh Allen, when they got blown out, he wasn't involved in any touchdowns, so that's going to skew positively in the direction of their QB rank. But then the following week after that, Baker Mayfield comeback win. Then the week after that, obviously that was the big one against Tua where they were playing from behind or playing ahead. And on top of that, I just think Dallas's offense has been very impressive. Wherever the Cowboys are playing, whoever they're playing, that's going to be a game we're going to have exposure to the entire season because their defense is just not good at all. And they're going to just allow points left and right. So with that said, after allowing, you have a a weird game against Philly where they only allowed 24, but all 24 was in the first 2.5 quarters, and then they had the lightning delay. It was a weird where nobody scored after that, but then allowed 37 to Russell Wilson, who is no longer the quarterback for the New York Giants, or the starting quarterback. Then they allowed 31 to Chicago Bears. Caleb Williams, his first 3 touchdown plus game. And then you have Jordan Love, who goes for 30 plus. So both of these, I know I was going to get to Justin Fields next, but both of these guys are in play. Dallas doubles, New York Jets doubles. I'm for both of them. It doesn't matter which way you put it. I'm going to have a ton of exposure to this game once again, and a lot of people will as well. But bringing up Justin Fields, I think sample, because he went off against his former team, hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers in opening day, went for 2 rushing touchdowns, modest passing numbers, but you're never going to get there with Justin Fields throwing for 300 yards on a routine basis. He'll get there every now and again, but it's mostly his rushing upside. And he showed that on that showdown slate against the Miami Dolphins, where he was just not really doing nothing. It felt like, especially in that first drive where they went 90 yards and then got punched out at the 1, they had tried to establish the run. 11 rushes on that 12-play drive, and it was working. So they wanted to continue establishing the run even when they were behind. But at some point when they were down 2 possessions, they were like, you got to go. And there was one time where it was a 2-possession game. 4th and 1, they went for it. They ended up passing it instead of running it. And Justin Fields turned nothing into something, ran for a 43-yard rushing touchdown. And then they were playing catch-up the rest of the way. He got his passing numbers to salvage, and then a late-game touchdown to Garrett Wilson, which helped us cash some of our picks on our parlay. Very shout out to those 2 guys for doing so. But 2 of the 3 games, the only 2 games that he has completed this year, 28 and 29.5 fantasy points. Going against Dallas, who just allowed 30 to Jordan Love, like I mentioned, who allowed over 30 to Caleb Williams, like I mentioned, and then Jalen Hurts, multiple rushing touchdowns, and then the week 2 where Russell Wilson, 400 plus passing yards, 3 plus passing touchdowns. Dallas's secondary is just going to be targeted every single week. The problem is, this isn't an offense that's just going to throw it a ton. So if Dallas's running defense hold up and they don't get anything on it and they only score 2 touchdowns, Justin Fields is only involved on 1, he might be a dud. But at the same time, I'm willing to take that chance, even if he might be one of the most popular quarterbacks. Great matchup, game environment. And you know exactly the 3 guys to match him up with. Kind of similar to Dak at this point. Dak, you got Javonte Williams, you got George Pickens, who went off in a 2-touchdown effort, very strong performance, 36 fantasy points, 2 against the Green Bay Packers. If you want to go way down low, you got Jalen Tolbert, who played some snaps, 4 for 61, back-to-back games with six targets. You also have Kevontae Turpin, who had 5 opportunities last week for the week before in the pool as well, because he's also a kick returner. And they're below 4,000. Jake Ferguson. Boy, oh boy. Jake Ferguson just doing wonders for us on best ball. 12 targets, 14 targets, then 7 targets last week, but caught all 7 and caught his first touchdown in over a year. The last time he caught a touchdown before that, I was actually at that game in the debacle that was the Cowboys wildcard loss to the Green Bay Packers, where he caught 3 touchdowns come from behind, and he didn't catch a single touchdown last year. Finally caught one against Green Bay once again this year, but he's been phenomenal as the security blanket for Dak Prescott. I expect things to continue. $4,800, way too modest of a price, especially against a team that just allowed Darren Waller, who has not played since 2023, in his first game back to score 2 touchdowns. So Jake Ferguson is purely one of the better tight end plays on the slate. And then on the Jets side of things, Mason Taylor finally breaking out. Shout out to the Gale, one of our Discord members, one of our community members, talking about the coach speak of how they really wanted to get him more involved. He was really high in terms of snap share each of the first 3 weeks, where he had 88%, 72%, 74%. But if you remember, he had an ankle sprain that they thought he was going to miss time going into the season. He ended up playing, and he's played a ton in the first 3 weeks, but his production from a fantasy perspective has been hampered. But they were saying they wanted to get him more involved. Well, guess what? 5 for 7 for 65. That happened while prices were being released on Monday night. And so with that said, a $2,800 starting tight end in one of the best game environments on the entire weekend, who plays 80% of the snaps, finally got big opportunities to where he's had 13 targets in the last 2 weeks. He's the best value tight end play, bar none, on this slate. And then Garrett Wilson, man. Garrett Wilson, is he here to play? I mean, last season with the Aaron Rodgers debacle that it was, bringing in Devontae Adams, that kind of limited his production. Garrett Wilson through 3 years hasn't really been a big play threat. I mean, he hasn't had a season where he's averaging about 11.5 yards a catch through 3 seasons. First 2 seasons had 7 touchdowns. Last season had 7 as well. But a lot of that not missing a game, playing from behind, all that stuff. Well, this year, 3 touchdowns in the 3 games that have been competitive, but he's produced with, this was the sample with Tyrod Taylor, where he goes 13, catches 10 for a touchdown as well. Pittsburgh, apparently that's a really good matchup this year, but 7 for 95 in a score. That was on my bench, and I was sad, but I've listened and I've learned. And again, it's hard to blame them for not getting him involved early because they were so successful on the ground. I mean, they were popping 8 yards a carry on that first drive. And then after he fumbled, they were like, no, this is going to work. And it kind of was, but it just wasn't converting to points. But then when they were playing catch up, they finally were like, let's get our guy the ball. And so he had a big fourth quarter, and that capped off with, like I said, the touchdown that saved our parlays, which shout out to him. But again, best matchup you can ask for. Dead last against receivers so far. We had a 30-plus point fantasy game by Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson. Obviously, Philly, I don't know what the hell they did week 1, but obviously their receivers didn't get there. And in spite of that, in spite of Jalen Hurts only throwing for 100 yards week 1, no touchdowns to either of them, they're still dead last against receivers, and that's really saying something. The following week, 4 passing touchdowns to the following week, a big game to Caleb Williams, allowing 4 touchdowns as well. And then last week, Jordan Love, 3 touchdowns to Romeo Doubs. Like, dude, Garrett Wilson is going to go bananas for only $6,100. He might be one of the highest owned plays. And then also, worth noting, Breece Hall, because he is a pass catcher. Braylon Allen hurt his knee. It's kind of unfortunate because he was a big part of that first drive. Like you see, 4 carries, 26 yards, fumbled at the goal line. A lot of people that hate Breece Hall, oh, why was he in? Well, it's because when he is in against a good matchup, he averages 5 yards a carry. He's going to be in if he's going to be productive while he's playing, but he did fumble. And then on the kickoff, after Miami ends up scoring, he hurts his knee. Why is your big-ass 6'2", 240-pound running back running kickoffs back? Don't know why, but he got hit in the knee. He's likely going to land on IR. So with that said, Breece Hall, again, this is the advantage of prices coming out right before or right as the Monday night games are taking place. Season low price without your backup or your 1B running back, and you're also a pass catcher. You haven't scored so far this season, but it's against Dallas in one of the best environments on the week. It is really easy to just go Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Justin Fields, or if you wanted to flirt with Mason Taylor plus one of those guys. It's so cheap. It's so affordable. I'm going to be doing that a lot this week, so I just want to bring that up. I know I did spend way too much time on that, but those two names, very self-explanatory on why they as really mid-tier price plays. Puke plays, I want to jump through those really quick, then we'll get to running backs. Jackson Dart, man. I know he's got a Q tag. I don't expect that to be a factor. $4,500. Emery offline, off the air, did ask, are you willing to play Jackson Dart? And I said no, because one, I didn't expect him to be playing from ahead and winning the game against the Chargers outright. But also, I was like, it's not a great matchup. And yeah, he only threw for 111 yards. On top of that, Malik Neighbors went down towards ACL, so he is now out for the season. But at the same time, 10 rushing attempts, 54 yards, a touchdown, ends up getting there with basic just short of 20 fantasy points, but for $4,500, absolute smash. So now you're in a game against the New York. Now you're in a game against on the road in a dome against the New Orleans Saints, who are winless so far, who are bottom 6 against quarterbacks so far, and you're only $5,300. And then with that said, you want to bring up the guys that you're going to be playing with him, and then you want to be bringing up the guys that you're going to be playing with him. It's going to be Cam Scatterbo, who's $6,000, all the way down to $5,300 for Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale back-to-back duds, but at the same time, we've seen the upside before. Obviously, he had 31 against Dallas, and he by default is inheriting some of the most targets. But then you've got Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton has been a big play guy before. He's been a tournament winner before. He's been a high snap guy, opportunity guy when he gets the chance. And so with that said, he took on most of the snaps after Malik Neighbors goes down. So through 4 games, and 3 of them, Malik Neighbors played. He had 97% of the snaps, 99% of the snaps, dipped all the way down to week 3 to 76%, but then back up to 87% in week 4. And that was the game that Malik Neighbors was injured, ruled out. Everybody's going to be talking about Cam Scatterbo. Everybody's going to be talking about Wan'Dale. $1,000 cheaper, you get all the way to Darius Slayton. I just want to point that out. He's really strong. Last guy. Now, this is puke. This is puke, but this is fun. And I like to have fun with my puke. And with that said, the puke stack of the week is Bryce Young. Bryce Young, ladies and gentlemen, is the guy that everybody hates right now because he's one of the worst performing number 1 overall picks in some time. Won his job back with a second half of the season, really productive year. I think if I remember correctly, he was like QB7 from weeks like 10 on for the rest of the fantasy season. So like a 7-8 game sample size, he was like a low end QB1. And a lot of that is because he had rushing upside. He had, I think the final week of the season, which he had multiple rushing touchdowns and an upset win over the Falcons to kick them out of the playoffs in a shootout game. So he is absolutely shit the bed against the Jacksonville game. It was also a weird game. That was another lightning delay. He also had a weird game where they were up 30-0, including 2, I believe, special teams touchdowns. So he had a rushing touchdown, but that was really the only thing that salvaged his day. And then the other game was a really bad blowout against the Patriots where nothing was going right. They were down so much that Andy Dalton ended up finishing up the game. And then Andy Dalton threw a second touchdown, which a second touchdown by Bryce Young at $4,700 would have got you there. But the 1 game sample size where they were playing from behind, but close enough to be running 2-minute drill and comfortable, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards, 55 pass attempts, didn't have a ton of rushes, but 26 fantasy points for $5,100 is an absolute smash. And I know the floor is there, but also when you're talking puke, a guy that's going to be less than 5% owned, you want to talk about possible ceiling. And I don't mean that he should be one of your highest owned plays. It's a leverage spot, guys. Miami, awful defense. Carolina, awful defense. We saw Miami in week 1 allow 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 total touchdowns to Daniel Jones, to where he was one of the biggest winners of the week 1 slate. Week 2, we saw Drake May rush for a touchdown, throw for 2. And he didn't get there because in the fourth quarter. The Patriots barely played in the fourth quarter in terms of on offense because they had the weird thing where Miami had a punt return touchdown. New England answered with a kick return touchdown. It was a back-to-back return touchdown. And then the final game, or the final drive of the game, Miami takes the entire half of the quarter, ends up scoring, I think it was a field goal or a touchdown, whatever it was. And then the Patriots, when they got the ball back, all they did was just try to run up the clock. So he didn't really have an opportunity. That was basically a first 3 quarters kind of production. And he still got over 24. And then Josh Allen, 3 touchdowns, didn't break the slate with only 22 or whatever he had, but 3 passing touchdowns. And then last week, Justin Fields in catch-up garbage time, going for 28 fantasy points. Those are the samples for these guys. And it's not like any of these guys, Drake May, Daniel Jones, and Justin Fields, they're just these powerful presences. Patrick Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, the consistent fantasy guys that you're just like, well, what are you going to do? Those guys are matchup proof. I know Josh Allen is matchup proof, but the other 3 are not. And they let all of them dominate in terms of fantasy production. So if you're going to get a 24 possible fantasy point game, a 30 fantasy point game, another 30 fantasy point game as a possible opportunity in a true pick'em game, good weather, I would assume, being in Carolina at home, he could be playing for his job also. Second worst against quarterbacks, $4,700. I don't know how many people are going to be on him, but I would like to have a share or two of Bryce Young with some doubles because it is so cheap. You can afford whatever you want. It's a good game environment. A lot of people, because of the bad offensive play and inconsistent play from Carolina, they're basically at their season lows in price points. So you have Chuba Hubbard all the way down to $5,800. He's gotten all the important touches and snaps, but back-to-back duds because he did not score touchdowns in those. But both of the previous 2 games in playing catch-up had a receiving touchdown in each of those games, and he's not known as a receiving back. So imagine a game where he possibly plays from ahead or in a back-and-forth affair, what he can do. So $5,800, too cheap for him. And then you got, let me filter to Carolina. You got Ted McMillan. We're waiting for him. He's not a season low price, but he at least dipped $200. Somewhat tougher matchups, but also weird game environments. I mean, they were up by 30. They were down by 30, so he didn't really pop off. Has yet to score a touchdown this year, but he's shown some positive upside. He's getting all the targets, at least 8 targets in all 4 games. So he's inherited their true wide receiver 1 role. So with that said, we told you all the productive quarterback finishes, and obviously they're not going to get there without the receiver room. So $5,700, reasonable price. Jalen Coker, no idea if he's going to be playing. He's still considered week to week. So he is eligible to return off IR, but I don't expect him to play. If he does, I guess he's in the pool. Just a little bit riskier because $4,200, I wish he'd be in the 3K range. Hunter Renfrow, I mean, he followed up a 2-touchdown effort and a comeback win with back-to-back duds. He's been under 15 yards in 3 of the 4 games, so I just not really interested in going that route. Xavier Legette has missed each of the last 2 weeks. One of the worst starts to a season you can imagine. Missing 2 games. The other 2 games, you have 15 targets. 15 targets to have 8 yards. That's as bad as it gets for a former first-round pick. So Xavier Legette, $3,500, I guess. Sure, whatever. But I'm good. If I'm doing a double, I'm probably, because of the low ownership of Bryce, just do the simplistic Chuba and Tetaroa. And if not, Tommy Tremble. Guess what? Look at Tommy Tremble in the game without Jatavion Sanders, who left. He had an ankle injury in week 3. So Tommy Tremble, first game sample size without Jatavion Sanders in the lineup, catches a touchdown, 5 for 42, 8 targets, 15 fantasy points. He almost caught a second one. If I remember correctly, I was sweating the Travion Henderson rushing yards prop. And so that's the only reason that game was in my quad box. And I saw Tommy Tremble almost score a second touchdown. So at $2,700, now he's up to $29,000. I think the price tag is too low because I don't think Jatavion Sanders will be ready to play. They quickly ruled him out, and he was expected to miss multiple games when he did get injured. So $2,900. I think the 3, if I'm going a Bryce Young route and I'm going to do a double, I'm going to pick Tetaroa, and I'm going to either pick Chuba or I'm going to pick Tommy Tremble and then just figure it out from there. Really natural bring backs if you're going to go that route. I just wanted to bring that up real quick before we get into running backs. Is Devon Achane being basically wide receiver 1 / running back 1 for the Dolphins. You got Jalen Waddle, modest price. You got Malik Washington. even modest price that's going to inherit a ton of work. And then Darren Waller, his first game as a Miami Dolphin, first game in over a year, catches 2 touchdowns, 3 catches on 4 targets. Just kind of easing him back in. He catches 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, just worth mentioning. Very fun game environment. I'm going to be getting into that field. So, running backs is something I want to talk about. Last week, it was the rookie running back that was a shine. It's a little bit more of that this week, but it's more so the mid-tier running back is what I think the way to go is. I think there's so many good running backs in good spots in the mid-price tier. But first off, I wanted to talk about Jonathan Taylor, who is the highest priced running back. He's been the volume king. Games that he has not gone off, it's only because he did not score touchdowns. He's had really solid target share for what we've seen in years past. So 14 targets through 3 games. At least 3 of the 4 games has had at least 20 receiving yards. But he had a 3 touchdown game the week prior, 215 yards against Denver in a surprising win, back-to-back 32 plus point games, and then a couple duds kind of sprinkled in between. But he's as good as they come, one of the volume kings. Jahmyr Gibbs, we mentioned previously with the Detroit builds, is going to have some exposure because it's freaking Jahmyr Gibbs. Cincinnati's second worst against running backs. Like I said, RJ Harvey, J.K. Dobbins going to combine for 200-plus yards. Saquon Barkley, what's going on? What's going on with Saquon? He's inefficient. He's got 3 touchdowns so far this year, but 4 yards a carry or less in all 4 games. It's not working. He hasn't been over 20 fantasy points. Season low price. Season low price. Going against Denver. Denver, we just mentioned Jonathan Taylor going for over 215 all-purpose yards. Omarion Hampton following that up with a big breakout game with Najee Harris going over 20 fantasy points. And then last week, obviously, Denver being up 28-3. Really bad offense with Cincinnati until they figure out what they're going to do at quarterback and all that good stuff. So kind of omit that because Philly, we know they want to run the football. $7,500, he's in the pool. I don't know how to rank all these guys, but I would assume that Saquon's going to be the lowest owned of the 4 up top. And with that said, with positive matchup, he's sandwiched in between 2 guys that might be the highest owned skill player on the entire slate, with Jahmyr Gibbs being, everybody's going to look at that 31st. They're going to look at Detroit being the highest implied total and be like, oh, I want some of that. So he's going to be north of 25% owned. Devon Achane, he's going to be north of 30% owned probably because Tyreek Hill's now out for the season. 7,300 against Carolina. And Carolina was historically the worst defense of all time against running backs, if I remember correctly, last year. He has been okay in 3 of the 4. But this week, I mean, we're going to need to get back to those 9-10 target games with Tyreek no longer in the fold. So $7,300, we're all the way. Worth mentioning, Bucky Irving has a foot injury. It looks like 5 minutes ago, as of this recording, still looking for options and they're kind of keeping quiet on what's going on with him. If he's out, obviously other people can inherit a better workload for value. I don't think you need to go that route though, even if he plays or even if he doesn't, because there's so many options. Derrick Henry, we used to thrive, I'll tell you, playing him when he was a tight end against the Texans. He had 4 straight 200-yard games. 4 straight against the Houston Texans. Obviously, this defense is way better than it used to be when he was in his later years with the Titans. But in a game that does not have Lamar Jackson now, because he's unlikely to play this game and possibly going to miss through the bye week in week 7, they might run Derrick Henry into the ground this week in a possible must-win game because next week they're hosting the Rams. And one would think the way the Rams are playing right now, and on top of that, the Rams being an extra 3-day rest because they're on the showdown slate this week, that this might be the game that they need to win to get into the playoffs. If Cooper Rush is obviously not a threat on the ground, Derrick Henry might have 30-plus rushing attempts in this game. And for $7,000, he's in the pool. But going down, I talked about the mid-tier range. Look at all the green you see down here. I'm not even going to mention Ashton GT going for 37. Shout out to him for being one of our tournament plays last week. Omarion Hampton, back-to-back games. He was the chalk of the week, but it was really, really good chalk. His price has risen 600. It's still not enough, I understand. Kenneth Walker, at some point, is going to just wrestle away all the important touches from Charbonnet, but we're waiting and seeing that. Javonte Williams, shout out to him for being awesome so far this year. He has wrestled away and has the bell cow role with Dallas. So in the play, in the pool. Going to skip over those guys, but Cam Scatterbu, all the opportunity, 27 touches last week, 90 all-purpose yards. He just unfortunately didn't score, but 13 fantasy points was really solid for a $5,500 price tag. It's risen, but one of the better matchups you can ask for, a good game environment. And then right below that, the guy he's playing against is Alvin Kamara. I don't remember the last time I've seen him below 6,000. He's had a lot of very negative game scripts so far. Against Arizona, they were playing catch up from behind. They were down 2 scores most of the game. 49ers, they actually played it close. Guess what? He had 27 opportunities in that game. He just happened to not score a touchdown. With the Seahawks game, they were down 38-3 at halftime, I think. 38-6, whatever it was. So he did have 20 opportunities, but it was very inefficient for good reason. And then last week, they did keep it close, but Buffalo did pretty solid against him. So season low price tag, but one of season best matchup is what I would say. Obviously, Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, Buffalo, much better run defenses than what the New York Giants have done so far. So he's riding the thick of things. Mentioned Chuba Hubbard already. Trey Benson, first game without James Conner in the fold, had most of the snaps, but then he missed the final drive of the game and people want to make something of it. I don't think I'd make anything of it as long as he's healthy, because there is a possible rumor that he may have tweaked an ankle or something like that. So $5,700, one of the better matchups you can have at home. He is a 5-box running back if he is healthy. $5,700. You have several of those this week, but he may be one of the most overlooked of them all because positive game environment right there. You got back-to-back right there. It's a lot of people want to go boom, boom. Breece Hall because of the Braylon Allen injury. JK going off. Woody Marks. What the hell was that? 22 opportunities, 119 all-purpose yards, 2 touchdowns against Tennessee, 28 fantasy points for a $4,400 guy. His price rises because his snap counts have increased up and up each of the last couple of weeks. He's basically gone from 11 to 27 to 48 to 56. And that was the first game that he actually outsnapped Nick Chubb in a positive game environment. So for running backs. And so now that Houston is the favorite against Baltimore, they are dead last against running backs. It's a good spot for Mr. Woody Marks. David Montgomery I talked about. Same matchup as. I know he's a little touchdown dependent, but at the end of the day, it's the same matchup, kind of similar to Nick Chubb. I know Nick Chubb is getting wrestled away opportunities, but if he's the one that scores the touchdown, he might get there, and nobody's really going to play Nick Chubb because everybody's going to be on Woody Marks. I even skipped over Tony Pollard, who's at a season low price, playing a team bottom 10 running backs. As long as the game script is healthy, I think he could be in play. But there's not any, like this entire screen that you see, there's not a single guy that you're just like, gross. I don't want to play him. Maybe Zach Charbonnet, but 2 of the 3 games he's played this year, he's gone over 10 fantasy points. I mean, what do we do at running back? The main thing I will say is that this is such a good week this week. If you've never dabbled into a 20 max build, to just sprinkle a freak ton of these running backs. I mean, there's a couple that you're gonna have to take stands on, I would assume, to be overweight to most of the guys you want to be. But 3 running back builds, I think, is the way to go because of all these matchups this week. There's not a lot of receivers that we're going to build with up top. There's actually only 3 guys above 10K this week, and 2 of them are possibly in spots that might not be that attractive to guys like Jamar Chase, back-to-back duds. Great spot, but I don't think ownership will be quite high. I think it won't exceed 10%. Monterey St. Brown probably will be popular because he'll be the only one up there. But JSN, bottom 5 matchup against Tampa Bay, but he's a volume king as well. So we'll just kind of see what happens. But now the point is, not many receivers to play up top. All the running backs look good. All of them. I mentioned all these guys up top. I mean, Derrick Henry, I was going to gloss over, and then Lamar's out. And so I'm just like, oh, at home against Houston, must-win game. Now they're home dogs. This could be a 2-touchdown, 30-touch game for Derrick Henry. I wouldn't be shocked. And so I have no idea how the ownership is going to work with all these things. But I want to play a lot of these guys. My running back pool is going to be absolutely fat this week. And so I just wanted to bring that up. But let's go ahead and we'll do some first look lines. I'm going to start off. I'm going to do a sample for a Dallas build and a Jets build because that is another fun game environment that is going to be very interesting. And then we'll maybe pick another quarterback. There's not a ton of sexy ones. I know, like I said, Daniel Jones. Oh, I know, like I said earlier, Jaden Daniels likely to return this week. Jalen Hurts, tough matchup. He had 0 passing yards in the second half last week, but because he has multi rushing touchdown upside, he's going to be the pool. But it's just he's not one I want to really stack, if that makes sense. Like I'm fine playing him. If you want to talk the Saquon Barkley being in a buy low spot, and you want to go the other way and say it's a rushing touchdown game for Jalen Hurts, that's fine. I would just do him naked instead of trying to force a double for Jalen specifically for this game. But yeah, like I said, let's go with Justin Fields. He might be my favorite quarterback on the entire slate. Like I said, the 2 healthy games he's played this year, 28 fantasy points, 29 fantasy points. This is now the best game environment, best matchup you can ask for. And so with that said, I'm going to start off, because of the sexy names at running back, I want to play a lot of Breece Hall this week. But in this first look, I want you to be playing with the pass catchers on this one and see what works out, because Garrett Wilson is going to get there. Love him this week. He is the thumbnail for this video. It's going to be really exciting. But Mason Taylor, it's just too cheap for the role that he has inherited, and because he had to hit the big breakout game while prices were being out on Monday Night Football. Houston Texans, that's going to be the chalk defense this week without Lamar. $2,400. Shut out the Titans last week. I mean, they haven't really created turnovers. Only 3 turnovers through 4 games, but they have not allowed 20 points this season, or more than 20 points rather this season. So playing Cooper Rush, I think it's a spot where they're a very safe 6 to 7 points for $2,400. That's going to get you there. They'll likely be the most popular defense. So if you wanted to be at the field, slightly underweight, I understand, because defense is weird. We saw 2 weeks ago where there was 8 combined defensive/special teams touchdowns, and they were all from defenses that nobody was playing, essentially. So they're in the pool. There's a couple names out there if you don't believe in Miami without Tyreek Hill. Tennessee, they've sucked. But, I mean, their defense was actually doing pretty fine until Houston had 2 late scores in the fourth quarter. It was an ugly game, but 2 fantasy points is not going to get the job done. But the first 2 games, they were cheap, had at least 4 for $2,300. One of the lower totals, I understand, if you don't trust Arizona's offense. Otherwise, just kind of mix and match defense if you don't believe in Houston. But Houston, I think, for most of these first look builds, are just going to naturally make me feel better about my lines. Running backs, let's find 3, because I want to do a lot of 3 running back builds. Let's go with a buy low possible breakout spot for Saquon Barkley. $100. Let's rock and roll. I'm also going to follow up that by, let's say we go down here and let's correlate a little bit. So I don't know how much Woody Marks I'm going to play, if this is too much of an overreactionary thing, but 22 touches is 22 freaking touches. He also is a pass catcher. He's had, a 37-yard reception, 5 targets, 50 receiving yards last week as well. So correlating that with the defense, getting cheap, you got 6,700 remainder. You can do whatever the freak you want. I think it's really interesting to throw in Jamar Chase this week. I'm just saying, we'll see what happens. I just want to be overweight to him, and you have enough to afford whatever you want. And then in terms of the last guys in, you can kind of do a lot of directions. If you want to go low cheap play, if you want to correlate, I did mention Jamison Williams, $4,900. That's really nice. $7,500 allows you to do whatever you want to in this environment. I don't know if I want to do that in this specific line. Let's go with Marvin Harrison continuing to break out. Obviously, he had 2 back-to-back duds. Very disheartening, because back-to-back weeks he killed some 6 picks for me as the last leg. But then last week I don't play him. Like I said, I sacrificed for you guys if you did end up playing for him. He had a really bad start and then finished strong in a comeback effort against the Seahawks in a tough matchup. 10 targets, 66 yards in the score. So now Tennessee, much better matchup than the Seahawks were, being at home, $5,400. Hopefully people won't be too much on him and overweight. If he's 20% owned, I might want to be away from him. But if he's going to be less than 10, I might be okay putting him last man in. And then $7,000, you can do whatever you want. If you didn't want to correlate Houston with Woody Marks, you can go away from there. Put in Nico Collins, who's had some pretty strong efforts in recent weeks. He didn't catch a touchdown last week, but the previous 2 he caught touchdowns and averaged 10 targets a game. Correlation, Derrick Henry. you get to bring back. I understand this against Houston's D, but like I said, the opportunity and volume I just think is going to be there for him. That's just kind of worth mentioning. If you didn't like Jamar Chase, you hated him, ew, gross, I don't want him. That's fine. Go to Amon-Ra St. Brown. You got $6,900. You can go Emeka Ibuka. You can go Nico Collins, like I mentioned. You can go Amari Hampton, GNT, all the way down. You can try to get up from Marvin Harrison. Or let's say you wanted to go with Jahmyr Gibbs in this build. And then that left you 7,100, which allows you basically everybody except for the top two. There's just so many ways to go with these cheap guys this week. We've got two dominant running backs. One of the best plays at receiver this week, a mid-tier, reasonably priced guy, but wide receiver one alpha on his team, and you still got 7,100 to spend. That's basically what I'm saying and why I like this slate so much, especially at the running back position. Let's put a button on this one specifically, and we'll just put let's go Nico Collins, and then instead of Woody Marks, you get up to Trey Benson. I don't really want two Cardinals. You can triple stack. I don't want a triple stack, but it's viable based on what we've seen Dallas allow this year. Can't really get up to the other guys. So let's go down from Nico. Let's go to George Pickens as a bring back, because actually we didn't even bring back on Dallas, so that makes sense to do so. And then last guy in, you got a at home 5-box running back with Chuba Hubbard, technically 4.5 because I don't know if they'll be favored by the end of the week. Or if you want more pass catching clarity, you got Alvin Kamara right there. Next up, let's try, like I said, I want to do the other side real quick. So we'll do a speed build. So we'll go Dak this time as a double. With that said, if I'm doing a Dallas double, I'm probably just going to do as simple as going Jake Ferguson. I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson probably as the preferred bring back. And then also you're going to go with George Pickens at $6,600. Big game, like I said, 36 fantasy point game in the tie. That was the Scoregami week 4 matchup with the Packers on Sunday Night Football. Houston defense, throw it back in. Don't care. You got 6,000 remainder. Like I said, you can do whatever you want on this slate. Because, like I said, most of my builds, I'd probably prefer to have 3 running backs. But again, it's a PPR format. So if you want to go four receivers, that's totally fine as well. In terms of the highest value showing right now, it's a lot of running backs. I will say that. Didn't even mention him on the first build, but he's going to be in a lot of my lines. Like I said, probably the most popular player on the entire slate. Devon Achane, $7,300. Lock and load. Don't even care if you correlate it. Just put him in and be happy and smile and all that good stuff. Let's go with a mid-tier running back. So let's put in a Amari Hampton. Say he puts in a trifecta. Still not enough. Probably going to have to get even cheaper. Let's go with Alvin Kamara. That's who I was going to try to do. And then I mentioned earlier Darius Slayton, $4,300. I think a lot of people are going to be going to Wandale. I think a lot of people are going to be going to Cam Scatterboo. And in this game environment, bringing back Alvin Kamara with a Darius Slayton, I think that's pretty unique. If I would say so myself. I think a lot of people are going to be playing Juwan Johnson in terms of one of the highest owned tight ends. Yeah, right now Juwan's showing as a top 3 owned tight end, so he's a popular Saint. And so going a cheap Alvin Kamara, you get a bring back of a Darius Slayton. You get 6,600 as the last guy in. That's Omari Hampton. That's Kenneth Walker. That's, let's say, Javonte, if you even wanted to triple. I probably wouldn't want to. Typically, I don't love tripling on a slate, but weird things have won millions of dollars. Juwan Johnson has back-to-back week 1 millionaire maker champs at tight end without correlation. So let's say last guy in. I did click on his name, Chuba Hubbard. And don't be afraid because of the price tags of all these guys to leave salary on the table. I'm not afraid of doing that. On top of that, there's a lot of these guys that are going to naturally correlate. And $800, like that might be a lot, or not. It might be a little too much. But you can go up to defense. You can go up to Philly's defense if you don't trust Bo Nix. Miami creating some turnovers, possibly, probably not. Chargers in a buy low spot as a defense. Or if you didn't want Darius Slayton, that's almost enough for Wandale. I think he's 5,300. Or you can go to Michael Pittman. Didn't even mention him yet, but very steady. Apparently, he's the wide receiver 1 for Indy this year. A lot of people were thinking it was Downs to start the year, but 3 touchdowns in 4 games. One of the target leaders on the team. So $5,100 recently priced. This is a criminal price. A criminal price. However, it's a horrible matchup. I just don't want to play him. I don't know what to do. Devontae is way, way too good to be this cheap, below the likes of Wan'Dale Robinson, Michael Pittman Jr., Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. He doesn't deserve to be priced below these guys, but based on the talent, but he kind of has to. I don't have a Detroit Lion in. Jameson Williams, like I said, $4,900. I like the price tag on that guy. And then one more bill before we get out of here. Let's go ahead and we'll pull up whoever the highest value is. I think it's Justin Fields. Guess who? I'm telling you about the puke stacks. Bryce Young is showing us the second highest value according to RotoWire right now, projected for 16.27 fantasy points. That is almost 3.5x. Awesome value. Awesome value. It's just Carolina and it's gross and ugly. But my last build, let's go ahead and go with Justin Herbert. I think that's a little bit more tournament-ish because nobody really knows how to build with him on a consistent basis. Last week, it would have worked, obviously going to Murray and Hampton. I guess that could be fine, but because there's so many good running backs, I think on this specific build, let's not, and let's just click two names. I don't know what to. I don't know. I can tell you projection-wise that Quentin Johnston projected the highest. Next up, it's Keenan Allen. Next up, Ladd. They're all within a point of each other. So mix and match. I don't care. If you do 20 lines, play 4, play 2 and 2 or 3 and 1, maybe fade 1 and then go Omarion in a second spot. I don't really know. But let's go with the most consistent option. And then let's just, for tournament's sake, because right now, Ladd McConkey is showing the lowest owned of the 3. Let's go with Ladd. Whatever. Again, Houston D, don't really care. Tight end wise, all of the dominant tight ends are on this slate. It is worth mentioning that they're all below 6K, so you can afford and get up to these guys. Tyler Warren finally had his first touchdown. 18.3 fantasy points was our thumbnail on Sunday. That was awesome. Still modestly priced again. Jake Fergie has been one of the best tight ends in terms of fantasy so far the last 3 weeks. Brock Bowers has not scored. He's been banged up. It still might be a little bit of waiting to see with him. Trey McBride, he is matchup proof. Last week had 11 targets, only had 7 for 52. So 12.2 might not get it done for 5,800, but he's got 100-yard upside. One of the only ones with 100-yard upside as a tight end on this slate. Let's put in Jake Ferguson. Let's put in Garrett Wilson. He's probably going to be my most exposed receiver this year, or for this week. That leaves you $6,400 per final 3 spots. Let's throw in freaking Woody Marks. That's $7,000 per. Let's throw in Devon Achane. That leaves you $6,700. You can do whatever you want. If you wanted Omarion Hampton, sub out one of those guys for a Marvin Harrison or somebody mid-tier at receiver, you can. You can go George Pickens instead of Jake Ferguson. Go down to either Tyler Warren. You can go down to Sam Laporta if you wanted a Lion in there. But for the time being, let's go with, I want to get some dominant running backs in this one. Actually, you know what? Garrett Wilson, let's take out of this one because I know I want some Garrett Wilson, but guess what? Breece Hall has probably as much upside, possibly even more than Woody Marks does, and he might be lesser owned. So $5,600, let's throw him in as the bring back to Jake Ferguson. Last receiver in, let's go Marvin. That's 72, 100 short. Oh no, I already have HN in there. So that's Derrick Henry. Or we can try to get even lower and get to a Saquon Barkley at 75. I'm on receiver, that's why. You can get to Saquon at 75. That's enough for the Michael Pittman tier, the Jameson Williams tier. Or if you wanted to get up to Jahmyr Gibbs, who is another fantastic play, he's going to be highly owned, so just be prepared for that. That's down here. Calvin Ridley's banged up. Trey Tucker followed up his 43-point game with a 4.2-point game like I expected he would. Cooper Kupp, 46. Don't remember him being that cheap, but it's hard to play him right now. Like I said, Rashad Bateman, not really. Pierce returns. He's the explosive downfield play for the Colts, but just worth noting, it's a top 3 matchup in terms of receivers. Darius Slayton back in there. Like I said, I'm going to be overweight to some Darius Slayton this week because I think he'll be a little overlooked. But for this one, put a button on it so we can get out of here. Let's go with Saquon as last guy in, and then we'll throw in Mr. Michael Pittman Jr. And then before we get out of here, I did want to go over some of our props of the week. Right now, I am on a 3-prop win streak in terms of the prop of the night. Had an absolute sweat with TJ Hawkinson having 0 for 0 right as I got off stream on the Sunday Live in the fourth quarter against the Steelers, and then catches 4 for 39 in the final, half a quarter to hit a 4-pick, do awesome, salvage my prop of the week. It was awesome. Emery, on the other hand, his prop of the week did not play because Jalen Warren's receiving yards was his prop because he had hit every game so far, and then he was a surprise scratch inactive for that very game, so he gets a push for his. But I'm 3-1 going into the week. Keep it going. My prop of the week is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs, over 69.5 rushing yards. He's had 2 90-yard games in 2 of the last 3. He's a big play guy, explosive guy, but we saw the rushing yards and what Denver was able to do, and just Sonic and Knuckles. I'm just going to be way over the field to both of those guys this week. 69.5 is just way too low to me he could get that in 1 quarter. The thing is, I don't really know what to do with these early props with only being a 10-game slate. On top of that, the injury news that we have, there's kind of limits on what you can do, but 69.5 I just thought was very cheap and reasonable for what I would expect to be the highest owned player on the entire slate, or one of them rather. It's just very low on what I would expect to be one of the 2 or 3 highest owned players on the entire main slate. So 69.5, I'm just going to lock and load and just smile, and hopefully he doesn't just go 50 yards there and then 70 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns and go off, but make me sad in terms of my parlays. Emery's prop of the week is going to go to a guy that's gone 4 for 4 on this prop so far. It is Quinn Johnston, over 57.5 receiving yards. Going against Washington, it's a bottom 10 matchup against receivers so far this year. And Quinn has been the one consistent presence. He's had at least 14 fantasy points every single game. He's had at least 71 receiving yards every single game. He's a, take the defense over the top play. He's a just get the ball to him recently with 23 targets in the last 2 games. So right now he's their wide receiver 1 until Ladd, figures it out. But for the time being, 57.5 is 13 yards lower than his lowest total of the season. So the volume he's got, unless it just completely goes and this is a mirage, man, 57 just feels like too much of a discount for somebody of Quinn Johnston and his workload thus far. But with that said, guys, that's all I got for you. We appreciate you. If you've tuned in this far, please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to be doing live stream on Sunday morning, doing another stream while there's a London game going on. So we're going to be sweating the Vikings once again, hopefully, but this time we won't have a ton of exposure to the props that are going to be involved in that game. But we hope you guys come and turn out. Please let us know what you think. Let us know how your lines went on Thursday night, because it's a fun showdown slate between the Rams and the 49ers that I'm assuming we knew the injury news, and hopefully the guys that we thought would go off went off, and it wasn't some weird third world name that nobody was thinking about going for 200 minimum price but going off on the slate. Can't thank you enough. Please keep on jumping in that Discord. We're doing props and doing community parlays and stuff like that. Very successful start in terms of college football, and then NFL was a hell of a week 4. So we're going to keep that momentum going and go right into week 5 and finish very, very strong. So I'm excited for it. I hope you guys are too, and we will see you guys on the next one.